Hello everybody, I'm Misa. This is my digital space I hope you'll enjoy. Now, we are almost at the end of August, meaning we are at the end of season 1 of Women in Poetry, and I have a big announcement to share. Earlier in the year, back in March, you would remember, if you were tuned in around that time, that I was celebrating 4 years of Misa Narrates, 4 years of this woman, and 4 years of my poetry. And I, in celebration of that, I released on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, the EP titled God is in the Rosefield. And basically, it was supposed to have just been, for me, something I just put out on the fly. You guys know me, I don't make too much of a big deal about anything, really. But I did eventually want it on streaming platforms. I was just so busy and life got away with me that I really didn't prioritize it. But as of now, by the time that you're watching this, some platforms have already picked up the tape on their stores. Others is still available for pre-order. So I have added the link to this post. I have put the link in my link tree as well, so that you can stream God is in the Rosefield on Apple Music, on Spotify, wherever you stream, on YouTube Music if that's your thing, and basically just enjoy that 9-minute, set of prose from me to you. Now, for me, why am I doing the final episode of Women in Poetry? Because I'm of the opinion that there's some information that I could share, and some things about my womanhood and my process in poetry that I'd like to share with some of you. So because I'm interviewing myself, and again, you guys know that the series isn't too hectic on the edits, I just want to enjoy this with you and to share as well, more so than anything else. So I'm going to pull up the questions that I'm supposed to be answering and asking. Usually I ask these things of my guests, but we're basically going to start with how I started this whole series. We get into the different elements of poetry and see where they intersect with life. So we'll start with allegory. Like we said, it's a moral story. I've never been one to think that traumatic events should be what quantifies me having learned a lesson. Like I always say, there are many ways to learn a lesson. Learning it through trauma isn't always the best way to learn it, because what if you had never learned it because of how traumatic the situation was? But I think for me, my most valuable lesson would be working in office spaces that I am not in control of. And I say that because there's much to learn as a creative artist working in less than creative spaces, or in creative spaces that have a lot of red tape, that have a lot of, systems in place in order to manage everybody working together. And I'm not going to say that you're just a number when you work in an office. You aren't. You are valuable. You are important. But your style of working might not be suitable to that organizational culture, or your ideals about what your work will entail might not be what your management believes is your role. And so being in my lifetime, I say my lifetime like it's been very long. I'm only celebrating 24 in October, but in my life, I've really only worked in 3 offices, if I'm not mistaken. 3 offices. And for me, I learned so much from those spaces, but I also learned what I would and would not be able to do long term. So I think, as any creative artist, whether you're a musician, whether you're a fine artist, whether you're a writer like myself, doesn't matter. There's so much to learn about the world outside of you and about yourself when you immerse yourself into an organizational culture that you do not set the tone of. We work as creative artists, because I don't like the term creatives. As creative artists, we all work together so much, but it's my set. when I have a concept and I call the photographer, I call the stylist, I call the model, like that's my set. I'm in control of that organizational culture in that moment. But if I'm going to somebody else's office, that's not my set. That's not my, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's very valuable to enter into those spaces and to learn about others and then to learn about yourself so that you can also know what you want to implement by the time you have your own office spaces or by the time you're leading your own teams, etc. Now, this is where it gets tricky because this was really written for musicians. The series is for musicians, and I am not a musician, I am a poet. But thankfully, I've been blessed enough that musicians like my poems to the degree of inserting them as interludes here and there, you know, working with me on a regular basis. So a metaphor or simile to describe my overall sound, I would genuinely have to say, like, my prose are equivalent to Alexander Desplat's compositions. And I mean that in the sense of I like very dramatic instrumentals. I don't like easy, happy-go-lucky, pop-esque instrumentals. They're really not my vibe. I want to hear pianos and cellos and violins and organs and harps, you know, and flutes and clarinets. I want to hear all of the instruments in the orchestra. I want the drama of all that. I want to hear the drums. I want to hear the gongs. I want to hear, you know, instruments. That's what I want. So I would also say that my sound is very Gregorian because I also make a lot of reference to biblical characters, to religion, etc. So I take a lot from the church, and that sounds wild, especially coming from someone that is openly non-religious, non-believing, etc. The mood or theme of my music, or I would not music, but again, so what do we call it of my prose? Let's call it that. The mood and theme of my prose is almost always centered around love and godliness, and not necessarily the godliness that we're taught about in the church, but the godliness within, you know? So both the godliness within and above. And another mood that I really play on, or another theme actually that I really, really play on, is infidelity and betrayal, because I feel like my introduction to love was through betrayal and self-hatred and just, yeah. As I'm thinking about it and reviewing it right now and considering the fact that, like, the lessons that I learned about love in my first few relationships, I promise I could have learned them elsewhere, because I still feel the remnants of those relationships, the rubble, you know, I need to learn love the way that I did, but for lack of a better word, I accept that lesson, I accept how I learned it, and it's made me an interesting woman. I can't say whether or not it made me a good or a bad one, but it's made me a very interesting one, I'll give you that much. And yeah, so that's why, like, infidelity is always a theme with what I'm working on, because it's about, infidelity is not just about being unfaithful to someone, it's about being unfaithful to your own word, you know? Like, you promised that it was forever and ever between us, and then all of a Sunday, your behind is gone, you know? And that unfaithfulness to your own word is something that I feel we don't discuss enough. It's always, whenever we talk about infidelity, it's always so-and-so cheated on me and it hurt my feelings, but we don't talk about the fact that so-and-so cheated on their own self, you know, and we really need to assign responsibility for that action to them and not to me, who must now be feeling all of the sads by myself. And foreshadowing, which was the part of the series where we discussed what an artist was working on, what they were kind of getting into. And so, since I'm the artist in this particular episode, I am working on a lot of fun things. Some things I can't say definitively. I will refer back to this video when I can. But I don't know. I think one thing that I'm keen to share. So I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the year, in about March, I think it was March, if not Feb. Was it Feb? I can't recall. I have a lot of like, fuck it, let me do it myself moments. And one of those moments was when I purchased the domain for Unseen magazine. And the reason why I purchased that domain, the reason why I wanted to have that website was because I felt as if in South Africa specifically and Africa at large, when you're not making a very well represented genre of music, for example, gqom, for example, hip hop, for example, soul, you're not going to get the kind of support and media coverage, and you might get it, but it might not be from publications that make sense to their ethos and then to what you want to do. So I made Unseen just to say that, this is the scene that I'm looking at. This is who's moving in that scene. This is who's producing in that scene. And I wanted to see more art, and I wanted to see art and music and culture. I wanted all of our things digitized. Now my goal and my hope, my dream really, is for Unseen magazine to have, contributors from around the world so that we can kind of all share in what our international arts and culture scene looks like, especially with it having to have gone so digital in the year 2020. But like, if you're interested in Japanese culture or Japanese music, I don't even know where you would start. And so for that reason, I wanted to at least create something where if you don't know about arts and culture spaces that aren't already well supported online, then I wanted Unseen magazine to be the space where we could potentially get to know who else is creating art and who else is in our arts and culture scene, because it's so rich and it changes so much every few months. People come up at the woodworks, and I really just wanted to make another space, to solidify another opportunity to tell stories for these individuals. So that's the only thing that I can share right now. The other stuff I will share as we go on. But if you've watched through to this point, I just want to say thank you for supporting women in poetry, specifically for supporting all of the content that's on my channel, that's on my feed, that's everywhere. Just like rocking with your girl because you want to. Like, I genuinely appreciate it. I see all of your comments. I do my best to respond to all of them. Some of y'all talk out the left side of your neck though, but that's okay. we can chuckle about it later. But for the time being, thank you for having watched. Thank you for having been a part of my digital space. And again, I'm Misa Narrates. I'm here to be enjoyed, and I'm glad that you have. I'll see you next time. Bye.